Welcome back to Lift You Up Inspiring Health Stories. I'm your host, Tamika Bickham. I'm the founder and chief storyteller of TB Media Group. But for the purpose of this podcast, I am your health and happiness matchmaker. Now, before I tell you about today's episode, I'm going to ask you to do, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit subscribe on YouTube, turn on those notifications, and connect with me on LinkedIn because I'd love to stay connected with you. Today is a different episode because we are celebrating triple digits. Yes, episode 100. This really feels good, especially for my team and I. Not only are we celebrating producing 100 episodes of this podcast that we launched right at the start of the pandemic, we are also celebrating that this is the podcast, which is now an award-winning podcast. We received an Hermes Creative Award for this video podcast series and are so excited that we've been recognized for this. So congratulations to our team on all of their hard work every single week on this podcast, and also for all of you for tuning in as well. So today we're going ahead, taking a look back at where we were when we started episode 1, some of the most impactful episodes, what I've personally learned and implemented, not only as far as health and happiness in my own life, but also in our business, our clients' businesses, and what that means for storytelling, content creation, and content marketing. Our physical, mental, and emotional health is not just a want, it is a need for happy lives and prosperous businesses. Lift You Up is the podcast where we share inspiring health stories from business owners who are fulfilling their purpose to live their healthiest lives and helping you do the same. From former TV reporter to marketing entrepreneur and content creator, I care about sharing stories that matter and stories that connect us. I'm your host, Tamika Bickham, your health and wellness matchmaker. We made it! I can't believe this podcast is officially triple digits. 100 episodes. That's what this episode marks. That's what we're celebrating today. It's certainly been a wild ride, and thanks for being along for the journey. Or if you're just arriving here, thanks for joining us here for this milestone. So today I figured it was a good opportunity to kind of take a look back at what has changed since episode 1 of the podcast, which was actually 2 years ago. We launched literally right after the start of the pandemic here in the United States. And it was a wild time to start a podcast, although it was a time to really actually feel more connected to people, meet new guests, invite them on, virtually connect with everyone. And we're still doing that 2 years later, 100 episodes later. And we've been pumping out this content every week for the last 2 years. Thanks for being on this journey. So today, kind of looking back at where things were, episode 1, some of the biggest things that I've learned and didn't realize around health, happiness, and storytelling from episode 1 to now. I mean, we've met people literally all over the world, introduced you to them. They're incredible stories of entrepreneurship, perseverance, self-discovery, and really what they've learned and incorporated in their lives and how they're helping you live happier and healthier. And I've learned on that journey. So I want to share some of that. Also, some of the things that I've implemented since starting this podcast. So it kind of goes along with the new things that we've learned. Because, of course, when you start a project, you have an idea of what to expect, but you really don't know what will come out of it. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that I've implemented around health, happiness, and storytelling, and also what's next for this video podcast. Biggest thing that I've realized, well, I guess to say episode 1, if you go back to that episode, and we'll link that below, is really about my journey and what led me here to starting Lift You Up Inspiring Health Stories, all about health and wellness, health and happiness, the intersection of storytelling and those two key things, health and happiness. And certainly when we started recording, we had no idea what this pandemic meant. The plan for this podcast was in the works before I think I even knew really the word pandemic and then that something like that could happen. And it's interesting because it kind of serendipitously evolved in a way into what it is now, because people weren't talking about health and happiness like that at the degree that they started to, and especially around mental health, about connection, until we were roaring into, our first dozens of episodes on the podcast. And all of a sudden we all found ourselves not able to connect and be with each other due to the pandemic. So the idea was already there in progress, and it just only elevated the situation of the world, only really elevated the importance of talking about health and happiness. And really, as a marketing agency, a content marketing agency, the importance that we're bringing those stories to the forefront that our clients are creating, and the importance of talking about values, what you stand for, and how you are helping people live healthier and happier in their lives, builds trust. And it's so important because everyone realized, regardless of who you are, what you do, what your business is, that you need those things to operate your business, to grow stronger communities, and to feel connected to people, right? So I'd say, as far as where I was in episode 1, which that's really a look back at how I even got here as an entrepreneur. It was called Flipping the Script from TV Reporter to Entrepreneur. So you can learn a little bit more about that journey. But I was very much always sharing the story of how I came from news. And I still talk about that. I love journalism. I love that authentic approach to storytelling and applying that to my business and to other businesses as well. But it's so interesting to look at 2 years later how much has changed. Our business has grown a lot since then. The needs of businesses have grown a lot. What is important to remember is that your story evolves and changes. If I were launching a podcast today, it wouldn't be about flipping the script from TV Reporter to Entrepreneur, because that's where I was then, still very early on in my journey. I guess 2 years ago is 2020. So had been about a year and a half full time operating this content marketing agency that was slowly but surely growing at the time. And in some ways, like other businesses and industries have seen, the pandemic did accelerate our growth in many ways after that initial kind of hard stop that we all felt. And that was the need for more online organic connection and the need for more video content. I guess you could say back then I was very focused on what my life was like before entrepreneurship, discovering what entrepreneurship really meant, and really kind of going day by day, in a sense, to grow, to learn, to understand what this all really meant, to lean on my past experiences, but not so much forward thinking as far as what could be created, the opportunities. And I don't know what I could, maybe I'm naming it here, what episode 100 is, but if I were to start a new podcast today, maybe it would be something like From Hustling Entrepreneur to Intentional and Balanced Business Owner. I don't know if all of that is accurate and true, but you'll see a little bit more about why I mentioned that. And truly, while I knew that these were topics that are core to my and our values at TB Media Group, I wasn't necessarily living it all the time. And I mean, I can't even say that I always am. And I think what it is in terms of health and happiness is up to all of us to really decide. And that's different, and it looks and feels different for everyone. But I'd like to just share a couple of the episodes that really resonated with me and also helped me discover, what would work for me when it came to health, happiness, and even storytelling. So episode 78, I really love, truly one of my favorites, with Chris Ratcliffe, who I guess you could also say was a burned out hustler in media and entertainment news, who is now a relationship coach and working with a lot of different individuals and has really grown quite an impressive following on his TikTok. And we did talk about intentionality and about self-care, because I feel like that became such a buzzword over the pandemic too. And what really resonated with me from that episode is that he said self-care doesn't have to be this grandiose thing. It doesn't have to be like, okay, I'm leaving and taking a 2-week vacation, right? But it's really about the little moments of each day, about showing up each day for yourself and being consistent. And those things that you do, little bits that you do that really fill up your own cup. And that could just be showing up a little bit each day. So that really stuck with me. Love that episode. So if you haven't seen it, he drops so many words of wisdom. And especially talking about people who are in high-powered careers. I remember specifically wanting to ask him, well, like, what about high-powered CEOs or those in the healthcare industry, right? Like, you can't determine your own schedule. You are working long hours. There are some things that seem in total contrast to self-care that will just be a part of life and how it is. And he really touches on that. And it doesn't mean you can't be a busy business person or a busy professional, but how do you show up for yourself in small ways that's consistent? So that really rung true with me and struck a chord with me. We've told a lot of really incredible, impactful, hard to hear stories that in some ways, when you hear them, you think, and I'll speak for myself, I think that, wow, I don't know if I could have survived that. From Ashley Lynn Olsen, she was on episode 76, a fantastic story about being paralyzed while she was in high school in a tragic accident. And also Maritza Contreras, who is the CEO of Calma Spas, who had a stroke, at a young age because, she said she was just burning the candle at both ends. And her spa which I have actually visited since that episode, is amazing. And it's all about like that inner peace. And they work with shamans in the spa, and it's a bit of a spiritual experience as well, which stemmed from, this very difficult moment in her life that she had to overcome, and they both did. And it just made me realize those are two examples. Maritza's episode is episode 61. So Ashley Lynn Olsen, who is paralyzed and has an incredible blog about wheelchair traveling because she never lost her passion for wanting to travel around the world. And episode 61 with Calma Spas founder are fantastic episodes about turning that tragedy into something wonderful for other people. And I think that's something I knew before when we started, but didn't really realize how deep rooted so many entrepreneurs and business owners, their work is in their own personal experience, but really just reinforce the importance of telling those stories. The vast majority of entrepreneurs and business owners have a reason why they do what they do. And a lot of times it stems from a milestone, a major event, even a tragedy in their life. But I think at the end of the day, we all do just the best that we can as human beings. And some people really turn these experiences into something incredible, not only for themselves, but for so many other people. So it really just reinforced for me that sometimes the most tragic things create the most good. And that is also the power of stories. And then lastly, I will talk about a little bit more about storytelling and people that have really stood out to me in how they approach storytelling, because I know we always talk about being authentic, opening up, being vulnerable, maybe in a way that's even uncomfortable for you or for a lot of people. And I think it's a good reminder, myself included, that storytelling shouldn't always happen once you've learned something. And I think the people who have had the greatest success with storytelling are those that are open and willing to be honest in the moment when things are hard, or when things are easy too. But a lot of times we want to share the success or share what we learned about the hard times after we're already through them. But there's something so refreshing and beautiful about seeing those things as they are happening for people. But it's uncomfortable for us to do that. And I will say it is uncomfortable for me to do that as well. I'll specifically highlight episode 20, very early on in the podcast with Jay Casal, who had an incredible, and still has an incredible podcast called The Lighter Side, followed by The Essential Lighter Side, which was the spinoff of that during the pandemic, highlighting essential workers, but pretty much with the context that everybody is essential. But The Lighter Side was about his weight loss journey, which was about 100 pounds after having, gastric bypass surgery. And he really took people on a journey. He built a community, and told people, before he had the surgery, during and after, what that experience was like, the challenges that he came up with. And I mean, even like his first episode of the podcast was 2,000 downloads and had sponsors. And it was really because he built the community around being so authentically him in the moments and what he was going through with his weight loss struggle. And I'll mention episode 82, Angela Cruz. You can find her with a booming YouTube channel, which is all about her binge eating and weight loss, and binge eating, yo-yo dieting, weight loss challenges and successes. And, we had a great dialogue about this is the thing. We all want to talk about, hey, we want to share the weight loss photo after. Hey, I lost 60 pounds. How awesome. But how often do you really share it before or early on when you're really not seeing the weight loss, or when you've lost weight and then you've gained it and talking about what that feels like? Well, she does that, and she does it really well, really authentically. And she's like, that's what brings people in. So if content creation and really building community and trust with your audience is something you want to do, you definitely want to check out those two. And it was something that really reinforced to me how important being open and honest about where you are right now in the moment is so important in building community and relationship and connection. So it's something that's not easy for really anybody. But if you're ready to take that next step in your storytelling journey, definitely something to think about, to really push yourself, like even on the bad days, to talk about those. So those were a quick recap of 5 episodes that really stood out and helped reinforce just self-care, good that comes after tragedy, and also building community and story. So what I've implemented, I want to kind of run down this running list that I've had based on learning those things. What does that mean as far as where I was? Episode 1 with health and happiness, because I didn't know that I was going to meet all of these people who talked about spiritual journey, mental wellness, meditation, taking time for yourself, not getting burned out. So all of those things happened to me during. I have trouble sleeping. I gained weight, lost weight, gained weight. I worked 15 hours a day for months and months. I got burned out and literally laid on a couch for 2 weeks, unable to move because I hit such a wall. I did all of these things throughout recording these podcast episodes while interviewing people and learning from people and really talking about how to be healthier and happier. And I don't think I've been like, oh yes, I do this. Like, it's been quite the learning journey for me as well, and realizing, wow, these people are incredible. I mean, Dean Karnassus, who's this ultra marathon runner who literally stands from morning to night. From the time he gets up to the time he goes to bed, he is always on his feet, and that is his health tip. So, I mean, the people that are able to do some of these things that we've talked about have really inspired me, which is why we call this Inspiring Health Stories. throughout the podcast and realizing, hey, what can I implement to be better? And, I would say that was one of the big things I learned as well, is that you are never really at your destination. And that's like still very much a learning process for me, because we always think whether we get to this weight, we'll be happy. Whether we get to this amount of revenue, we'll be happy. Whether we take this vacation, like whatever this milestone you have in your head as far as goals, but that you'll be happy once you get there. But I've come to realize, even especially through doing this podcast, that that's never really true, because once you get there, there's usually a new goal, a new mountain to climb, a new challenge to overcome. And that can be unsettling, or at least it's unsettling for me, but it can also be one of the biggest things to reinforce, to enjoy the now and be present. People say that all the time because I don't know. I say it, but it's like, do I really mean it? Do I really mean like I'm being present in this moment? But every new goal or accomplishment, I feel like, and it's something I need to work on, that I've achieved, I don't really celebrate it. And I just look ahead to the next thing and climbing to that next thing. And it's kind of like, are you ever really going to be satisfied? And not that it's not about being satisfied or dissatisfied. It's just about realizing that every time you reach new levels, there's new devils, right? There's new things to learn, and that's the beauty in life. So that is one of my biggest takeaways as far as trying to enjoy the now, because, hey, tomorrow may not come. We've learned that from plenty of guests on the podcast. And there will always be a new challenge and a new thing you have to face or deal with. So that will never really go away if you are an aspiring, passionate person who's constantly reaching towards goals. So as far as what I've implemented, I guess with that as the context, is the consistency. Kind of going back to that episode 78 that Chris said, hey, self-care doesn't have to be grandiose. And just getting back to like literally little bits of peace during the day, going to the gym every day and actually taking breaks. I have always been bad about, hey, like, I'm going to keep working through the day and eating my lunch at my computer, and actually, taking 30 minutes to step away and do some of those things each and every day are really nice. And just starting the day with time for myself. I actually started meditating after a couple of my episodes that really talked about it. And it helped my sleep dramatically. So if there's anyone out there who wants to, go on a meditation journey together, be accountable for that, definitely send me a message, because I will do it with you. I kind of fell off the wagon with that, but I would love to, because I don't always sleep so well. And meditation really is one of those things that sounds at least to me, it always sounded a little weird, but I totally get it. And I feel like it is fantastic. So that's a goal that I have for myself to get back to. We've talked a lot on this podcast about energy, saying no, understanding what you have around you influences you and how you move through the world. So definitely being very conscious of those things and the energy around you and its impact on your life, your business, and all the things that you do. I feel like we have also had the opportunity to serve our clients better, even through this podcast. And why do I say that? I don't say that because our clients have been on this podcast, but this platform really allows me the opportunity to have authentic conversations with people, get them out of their comfort zones, and truly get some incredible feedback from our audience, from people who have listened to the show and feel so connected to our guests. And the results are there. So really, I feel like getting our clients to come out of their comfort zones, to share who they are, encouraging them to take a stand on issues, has been like an effort we've even doubled down on even more, because of the issues that we do talk about on this podcast, around diversity and inclusion, around health and wellness, around self-improvement and what's important to people. And that's what attracts people to your brand, is when they feel aligned with those values. And we see it here on this show all the time. People are attracted to the values, the missions, and the stories that we share. So really taking what I've learned on this podcast through that storytelling and applying it as well with our clients. Another thing that I will mention that I really is always a work in progress, but I really enjoy what I do. Telling stories is fun. It comes naturally to me. I feel like when we do the thing that we enjoy and comes most natural to us, we want to continue doing it and wake up every day and do the thing. And so many people on this podcast have talked about that. And I would say keeping it fun, right? When we talk about content creation, I think whether it's video, a format like this where it's audio and video, creating a blog, like we do all of that for this podcast, and it can be a lot and get tiring. So just check in with yourself as far as what feels good around creating content. It's not always about numbers and metrics and what looks like what, but are you having fun doing it? Because that should be the first thing. Because if you're not having fun, you're not going to continue doing it. So I've tried to keep that at the center of how I'm feeling. If it feels too much like a job, like a thing you have to do instead of a thing you want to do, especially when I mean creating content, right? Like, it should be fun and engaging. That's why you're doing it. You're drawing people in, getting them to know, like, and trust you. The last point I have on here is to never stop. And these are things that I've learned and continue to evolve. Never stop refining your strategy, right? Like, this was so relevant at the start of the pandemic. Health and happiness. Episode 1, my personal story. Episode 2, 3, 4, what everyone was going through in that moment, the challenges that they've encountered. But don't forget that times change. People are, at the time of this recording, it's April. You're going to see this in May of 2022. I have been to more events so far in the last month and a half than probably all of last year. And it's good to be back out. So what does that mean? We may have to refine our strategies now. We may have to not change creating content because that is still valuable, but maybe just adapting to what we're talking about and how we're talking about it, and also how we're presenting it. So it reminds me that every person I've spoken to and how they've responded and where they've showed up telling their story, how they've created content, the stories that they're telling, the businesses, even larger than that, the businesses that they're building have all changed and evolved as they've changed and evolved, and they've pivoted and changed strategies as the world around them has changed. So I think that's important to remember. And I think that's something that as we sit here on episode 100, I am definitely taking a look at, hey, how are we growing and developing this podcast, our content, our clients' content in a way that still makes sense for the world we're kind of entering into, which is a bit different than the world was, or a lot different than the world was 2 years ago. So don't forget to evaluate, look at things, see how it feels to you, and change that. So that's really the list, which leads me to what's next for the podcast, right? All that considered, looking at strategy, looking at the impactful stories, looking at how much fun I am having, and where we need to create space for things. So I've decided to take, after this 100th episode, to take a brief hiatus. We did this at this point last year as well, for about 6 weeks. So we'll take a brief hiatus from the podcast. We've still got plenty of interesting guests lined up we are still recording episodes, even actually tomorrow as I'm recording this, some more. We'll be back, but we'll be coming back every other week with new episodes on Mondays. So that will not go away, but you will not see us every week. You'll see us every other week. And that is to allow some space for some new content. So I want to make sure that I'm jumping in here with some actionable tips around content, around corporate social responsibility, around how you're showing up, around brand messaging and telling your story, and incorporating that as well. So if there's anything specifically you'd like to hear, especially, maybe you're a health and happiness brand, maybe you want to figure out how to talk about your core values, message around those things better, make sure to go ahead, let me know, send me an email, message me on Instagram or LinkedIn, let me know what you would like to see more of on this podcast or in content in general. That's something I haven't decided yet exactly where this content will show up. It may be on the blog or LinkedIn, and sent out in our email list. But let me know what you would like to hear, where your business is now, and the type of content that would help you take steps forward in your marketing strategy. That's what we're going to be working on as we take this brief break, and we'll be back at the end of June with more inspiring health and happiness stories, even, more amazing guests, greater content that keep you motivated, keep you living healthy and happier, and telling great stories. That's what we're all about. So hopefully this look back and at what I've learned, some of the stories that we've shared on this podcast has been helpful to you. And let me know what you thought of this episode. I, again, thank you for helping us celebrate 100 episodes. I just want to say thank you again for tuning in for 100 episodes of Lift You Up Inspiring Health Stories. It's really been a journey. We're going to enjoy this brief hiatus and break that we're taking to work on some more new, exciting content for you. And again, celebrate with us. Go ahead, comment below, send us a message, send us an email, and help us celebrate this milestone, in addition to now being an award-winning podcast. So that's really exciting. So we'll see you again in 6 weeks for new episodes. And also, if you missed that part at the end, also send me a message if there's certain content that you want to see around storytelling, messaging, content creation, and marketing. I'd love to create some of that content for you. So until I see you back next time in a few weeks, stay happy, stay healthy.